Uh, so, good afternoon, everybody. It is, according to my clock, 3 minutes before 3, so 3 minutes before we start this. So we're giving about 4 minutes until we kick this off. And my colleague, Tony or Betty Gül, would you mind confirming that you can see the slide? Just a quick tech check.
Yes, we can. Yes.
It's visible.
That works nice. So I will try to update the, do the subtitles. Can you see subtitles now?
No.
Okay. The subtitle option has gone. Ah, well, okay. Okay, we're giving it 2 more minutes. We are already, people are coming in already. That is great. We're giving it 2 minutes. Whilst you are, everybody is in the chat and saying hello to everybody, we always play a little game at these wonderful webinars, and the game is who's got the nicest weather. So if you're from an interesting location, I'm not, I'm from Hamburg, we don't have the best weather, then please let us know in the chat where you are dialing in from and how much sunshine and blue sky you are currently enjoying. Let's see, Karen is saying it's sunny and hot in Cape Town. Yes, our colleagues in Cape Town are always telling us how great it is down there. We're always jealous. Even the UK is having blue sky. Not sure that's a miracle indeed. Ah, there's someone from Duisburg, Germany. I'm sure you're suffering as much as I do. Ankara, 13 degrees, that's good. Himalayas. Oh, wow. That's amazing. Italy. Ah. Peru, 25 plus humidity, but it still sounds very nice, Mario, from Peru. And Carla's from Berlin. I'm pretty sure you have the same weather as we have here in Hamburg. Okay, it is 3 o'clock. I would like to officially welcome you all to the first webinar of Amsterdam in the new year. This one starts with a very relevant one, the donor updates for 2025. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. This session is recording, so you do not need to frantically write all the notes here in there. You will receive the slides and you will receive the recording. I think it takes a day or two until this goes out automatically. I am joined by 3 of my colleagues here who will introduce themselves in just a second. And the format of this webinar is that we will go through around 25 slides of looking at some of the major donors here over the next half an hour, 40 minutes. 40 minutes would be really good, so that we have about 10 minutes or so before close for questions and answers. If you have any questions, then please put them into the Q&A box down here, not into the general chat. This is a very large webinar, lots of people here. We will certainly miss them if they are in the chat. So please put them in the Q&A. If there are questions we do not get around to as part of this conversation, if you leave your email address as well, then we will get back to you via email. And that's pretty much it on the technicalities of this webinar. So let's get started with the donor strategies and the trends outlook for the next few months. First things first, my name is Chris. I'm the Managing Director of MZ International. My role here is to connect our partners, our NGO partners, and our nonprofit partners to the right funding strategy and the right funders. I personally focus a lot on institutional donors and on innovative finance, together with my friend and colleague Cedric here today. I'm joined today by Tony-Ann, Betty-Gül, and Cedric. Tony-Ann, your picture appears right next to mine, so you're next with the introduction.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone. My name is Tony-Ann Robinson-Beck. I'm a consultant here at MZN. I mainly work with our clients to, just get their business development pipelines ready, stable and strong. I'm a Jamaican living in southern Germany, so I do have blue skies today, Chris.
Oh, God, stop it.
So I'm looking forward to, delving more into this presentation and speaking with you afterwards. Thank you.
And because it's always ladies first, Betty-Gül, would you like to continue?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Betty-Gül Onay Özman, and I work as an analyst at MZN. And I look at markets, funding opportunities. I do research and support NGOs in that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Cedric, it's a pleasure to have you here today, my friend. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Chris. And hi, everyone. Very pleased to be here with you today to share this webinar. So my name is Cedric. I'm principal at Cois, which is an impact finance firm. We typically design, structure, place innovative finance products. We have our own impact finance products, and we also work with partners to structure some products in the impact finance space. We are a partner of MZN International. Pleasure to be here with you. And as you might see, I had to turn on my light because I'm based in Paris and it's gray and raining here. So quite jealous of what I see on the chat, but very glad to be here.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Okay, let's dive in. The format of this webinar is very simple. We are going to look at some principles of funding. Then we look at the USAID, of course. That's where probably half the questions will be around today. We look at the EU, at the GIZ, so the three large institutional donors. We look at some of the major foundations as well. And Cedric will share with us a couple of things on catalytic finance, which is a lot. On each of these subjects, we could easily fill a 2-hour webinar. So we need to keep a certain pace here in order to even get through this. Bear in mind, the purpose of this webinar is to give you an impression of trends and what's coming up of these major donors every quarter. Next quarter, we look at other donors when there's no major change here. The purpose is not to do a deep dive into the localization strategy of the GIZ in country X. So we need to stay at a certain higher level. We've devised this webinar upon your demand, where you said, can I get I think the specific request was a year ago, can I get a webinar that in half an hour gives me a general flavor of where it's going that I can drink over a coffee? Not sure that we're going to get it into half an hour, but let's get started. So this is a brief and pragmatic overview of what's to expect. I've just said this, so I will save time here. We are going to look at today, the 25, the funding trends and the strategy guidance. Strategy guidance is going to be the tips, the pragmatic things you could do or you might want to consider in your funding strategy. Diving in, there's a lot of change, and we want to start with an inspiring quote from a country director we work with in Kenya. And she said, look, a noble cause without the financial resilience and resources is a promise without the power to deliver. And I think it's worthwhile saying before we dive into each individual funding related question that funding is not your number one concern. It's absolutely not the number one priority even. But it is our bridge between our values and our actions. So it may not be the number one, but it's often the most urgent. So the fact that we are concentrating on where to get the money from, how to fund our actions that are underpinned by our values, we do this always with a conscience that we want to fulfill a promise here and make sure we have the financial resilience required. If you want to go beyond this particular webinar, then please sign up. There is a link here to the newsletter. Every month, my colleague Jonathan is sharing a lot of insight, this time from COP29 last time. Next time it's going to be on Davos. Cedric, I think you've been there as well. And a few funding trends and funding mechanisms. Good. Here's the first thing I would like to really highlight before we dive into any particular donors. There are some principles by which a business development function in a nonprofit or in any organization for that matter ought to be managed. And yes, it is sometimes driven by the opportunity that you may see yourself. But if we are only responsive to opportunities that we found in procurement portals and other things, then we will never achieve a sustainable financial record. We need to go beyond this. So there is a strategy question where we highly advise to focus on your strategic donors by the countries and the theme you're focusing on, not just on many donors. For many of our partners, diversification has gone either too little or too far, frankly. You want to really increase the income, and that's the hard measure. It sounds almost obvious, but a very strong donor pipeline management with proactive pre-positioning to these opportunities will end up with an increased income. And it sounds very obvious to do, but we see this time and time again that partners join us on our funding support scheme, and they just don't even have a strong donor pipeline management principles behind it. And that's an obvious thing we can build in the first 2 months. And sure enough, within a few months after that, the successes start to increasing. We also are a strong advocate for reducing the costs per proposal of flagship programs. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but if you have a flagship program or sort of a core program that you do again and again and again, reducing the cost of pitching, that is a very effective way to increase the amount of proposals sent out here under this core flagship program, and therefore basically sell or pitch your core competency programs to a variety of funders, not just donors, but also funders. One thing that is continuously concerning me always is an alignment of the funding timelines with the long-term goals. Anybody studying finance from day one knows you want to finance an asset with its a useful economic life. The same goes here as well. It is simply unsustainable to fund programs that need 5 to 10 years of impact with 2 to 3 years of grants. So an alignment in the timelines makes not just for a more convincing proposal, but also for a much better funding strategy. And it helps us inform the type of funder we want. We are going to present some of them today. And then Cedric's topic today is about going beyond that grant-driven module and mobilizing private capital that align with your values and your programmatic capacities. Cedric, I'm not going to say much more. We're going to talk about this more later. These are, of course, just sort of 5 key tenets and principles of a good business development pipeline. I hope you find them. I hope they give you some inspiration. There's plenty of more resources on the MZN website looking at each one of them. And if you can't find them, reach out and we'll send you the link. Now, let's get started on what we've come here for on the individual donors. I think my colleague Tony Ann is taking over here. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Great.
So thank you, Chris. And just to piggyback on Chris's last slide, we decided to include that slide, which we've been doing for about a year, because we feel it's important to keep the same foundational aspects or principles that we've always had in the development sector, but to make them more diverse and more vibrant. I guess everyone can agree who's attending this call that times are changing and they're changing very fast. but we don't want you to lose sight of why you started in the first place. Okay, so let's jump into the big picture. For the next couple of slides, you will see a macro analysis of all the different donors that we've analyzed for the past couple of weeks. And this slide just takes you into just a very general overview of what you can expect. So we'll start with stagnating public budgets. So we've seen that DAC donor budgets are either increasing marginally or declining. And they're geared more towards humanitarian or violent crises. And then we also see that larger institutional or government donors are generally setting funding compliance measures or funding priorities with what they have or what they seem to deem as important or what are priorities for them. One way we can sidestep this is to develop and implement income diversification. So this includes your regular traditional grant funding, maybe a little catalytic finance, maybe working with, I don't know, a corporate organizations and providing your services there. So just looking in the landscape and seeing how best you can diversify your portfolio and your income receipts. There will be a greater expectations for foundations over the next couple of months, we see maybe even years, because of this US foreign aid assistance freeze. They will be needed to cover the funding gap. And this stage, it's too early to determine if they have the capabilities to do so, but we hope that they'll be able to continue the trend of incremental increases that we've seen over the last 3 to 5 years. At MZN, we have a top 100 foundations list that you can access when you register your interest. We have a link which we can share with interested persons, and you can use this list to identify top donors as well as lesser known donors, which will help with, you know, identifying donors that won't have that much competition. And then we have...
Before we get a million questions on it, we should say that we'll include the link to that in the email mail out.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that.
The last topic we have here is about venture philanthropy, impact investments. Those are, I don't even want to say on the rise, they're here. And they've established themselves as a formidable force to counter against the disruptions that we've experienced these last couple of days. In 2024, it was a 1.5 trillion US dollar sector, the majority being in Africa. And we also have a link where you can submit a pitch if you're interested. This will also go out in the email. So you just have to let us know. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have quite a bit to cover here. I'll try not to repeat what I feel everyone knows, but yes. Last week, the world was shook when the USAID and other US aid agencies acting on the order of the Trump administration decided to freeze their assistance. This is a 2 to 3 month freeze, we think. There are no guarantees right now, but inevitably they want to ensure that all US funding disbursements align with their foreign policy. At this stage, we have an indication of what that foreign policy will include, but of course, that's not extensive or exhaustive. It could change, it could remain the same, we don't know. We do know that there is a pause to support for WHO, for climate change projects, and for DEIA projects. And diversity, equity, inclusion, and assistance projects cover things like disability inclusion, environmental justice, gender-based projects, LGBT-based projects, sexual, gender, and sexual orientation projects, to name a few.
Yeah.
So this is what we can foresee at this point that the administration is not very favorable towards. Hopefully there are some leeway, so maybe a few of those components like disability inclusion after different participants may have considered what is, you know, what is mostly needed in the landscape, in the development sector, and then we can see. But at this point, this is the list that we have, and we just have to wait and see what the administration decides. Next slide, please.
Yeah, we've already moved on to the next slide.
Okay. So what this means for those applying, we have a stop on all requests for proposals right now. There will be major revisions based on, this alignment with the foreign policy when they do get released, and no contracts will be issued as of now. Next slide, please. Okay, so what does this mean for current projects? There have been stop work orders being issued since Saturday of last week. We know that this follows the same 2 to 3 month timeline where it's being reviewed to, ensure compliance with the foreign policy. But what you should know, based on the list we've had here, if you've received a stop work order notice, is that you should document everything. Acknowledge receipt, first of all, of the stop work order notice, and discuss your options with your USAID contract officer or grants manager. An important point we want to note is that if there are any costs that the stop work order would have not curtailed or stopped and they're still ongoing, you should raise these to your CO or grants manager as well. You are contractually obligated to be compensated or reimbursed for those costs. This is not a guarantee. We're not sure what the administration has in store, but just to say you have legal recourse there. And if you're interested or you're, closely connected to your project and you would like to see it continue, we suggest that possibly you could reconsider for those diversity, equity, inclusion projects, maybe changing the name, changing the outcomes, changing the target groups, unfortunately, or just changing activities, just to see what will stick or what will be allowed. But this is a discussion you should also have with your CO or GM. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving forward, 2 to 3 months waiting period. It could be longer. We're not sure at this point. And once these foreign policy interests become clearer, then we'll have a greater indication of where the money will flow to. We see indications that economic development projects will take forefront, and these are projects that promote inclusive growth or encourage investment for private sector organizations to thrive, essentially. And of course, countries or regions perceived to serve the administration's interests will continue receiving funding, of course. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now we have the EU. And from what we've noticed with the EU, there have been, I would say, a very marginal increase in the funding that they have to offer for the next couple of months. We see the ECHO budget increasing marginally. We see key allocations across different geographic regions, either increasing, staying the same, or decreasing substantially. And for there is a 405 million euro fund available for what they call global emergencies. So this includes humanitarian crises and innovation projects and policies. And the money split between that is 295 million euros for the crises and 110 million for innovation. Next slide, please.
Great.
Okay, so this slide just takes us through some of the forecasted trends that we see with the EU. First of all, I must say that the EU does not have the capabilities to fully cover any funding gaps left by the Trump administration freeze. So while they might be able to put some things to, cover it a bit, it will never ever fully account for everything that's needed funding. Right. So we also discussed the slight increases, and then there is a penchant for the EU right now to focus more on projects and policies that align with their regional interests. And this regional interest, similar to what we discussed with what's proposed for the Trump administration, aligns with, investments, economic growth, etc. There is a plan for the funding to be merged in one instrument, and this would include the Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, Humanitarian Aid Instrument, and this would be merged with the Instrument for Pre-Accession, which is usually for interested states, usually in Southeastern Europe, to join and access membership. So there will be concerns there, because if all the money is put in one instrument, there is not a great guarantee that it will go to the most needed causes or the most pertinent causes. We have mentioned here the Global Gateway Strategy, and this is similar to what I said before of, this focus on investment and economic growth. They're trying to boost flexible investments to areas such as Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, Latin America, etc. Next slide, please.
Very clear, yes.
Okay, so this slide essentially just has some, I would say, alternative approaches that, interested applicants could take, and or it's offering a little overview of what's happening with some traditional government donors. So the first thing I want to talk about is Horizon Europe, and this is a $95 billion program that, is aiming to sustainably address societal challenges to foster global cooperation. And when I reviewed the document, I realized that it's flexible to all countries, all NGOs across the world. So anyone can apply to the RFPs, etc. And from what I see, there is an allowance for pretty much all thematic areas to apply as well. I see a gender equality focus, climate change focus, energy focus, and there is even an allowance for like peace building, and other things like that. So it's just a matter of, tracking the opportunities and seeing where you align, but it's open globally. At the top there, we have some Southern European countries, which we see as emerging. They're offering RFPs and fundings, which might apply to, anyone who's interested. We have, those countries have disbursed about 12 billion for development and humanitarian assistance in 2022, and that was a 22% increase from the year prior. I will say that Italy, when I do funding searches, I see Italy cropping up quite a bit. They have rather moderate, I think, funding envelopes. It's substantial, and they cover a wide variety of areas. So gender, climate, peace building, etc. Lastly, we have the overview of the government funding. We have Germany, France, Sweden, Norway. So touching base with Germany first, unfortunately, Germany will see a 10% reduction. That's forecasted, a 10% reduction in the development ministry's budget. And humanitarian aid is projected to have a 50% cut, projected. Hopefully that's not the case. For Sweden, Sweden's budget is about 56 billion SEK, and they cover things like mainly pertaining to trade and investment, as well as, stricter immigration reforms.
Yeah.
Notably, very recently, they've expanded their compliance measures to favor not just Swedish NGOs, so there are opportunities there which you can explore. For Norway, Norway's budget has fluctuated a bit, but it's relatively stable, I say, and they focus on similar initiatives, so like climate investment, renewable energy, food security, food assistance, and they're also aligning with the EU's Global Gateway Strategy. And I believe that's me.
Very much. We'll look at Germany in a second as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Which brings us to an interesting element that is not donor related at all, but it is in fact funding and finance related. All of you may have heard the term innovative finance. Catalytic finance is a big part of that. And that is pretty much over to you right now, Cedric. We're looking forward to it.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, so I will mention a few things around catalytic finance, and actually I think there is a link with what Tonian was explaining in terms of the movements we see in the world today, especially after the US election, in terms of a decrease in some of the donor funding, or at least public spending in aid, and actually catalytic finance. So what is it first? It's a way to mobilize and to attract private capital, so private investors, into projects or programs which are for high impact social or environmental, for projects, and to use concessional or grants or donor funding to mobilize this private capital, actually. So we can see it, and that's why catalytic finance, because it's acting as a catalyst, where if you mobilize $1 of grant, for instance, you can unlock $10 of private investment for the same project. So in terms of key instruments that we see, and another word that you might have heard, about catalytic finance is also blended finance, actually, where we blend donor and private capital. So if we deep dive a bit into what it means in terms a bit more technical instruments, so grants is one where a donor would provide seed grants to a fund, to a program which is for supporting the SMEs, for instance, in a specific area. So this initial grant will unlock here additional investment and strengthen the SME sector or the social business. This is one example. Another example is what we call the first loss capital, where the grant and the donor money will be used to cover some loss, in the business or in the activities, in case there is any issues. Another type of catalytic financing is guarantee. It's something we see quite a lot in terms of climate projects, where the donor will actually guarantee some upcoming revenue for the project. So one example, for instance, is anything related to carbon markets, where a project can actually issue carbon credits and wants to attract financing. A donor can actually step in and say, I will guarantee, for any investor, a fixed amount of carbon credits for this specific environmental project. But it can also work in the social side as well. So this is what it means. Don't hesitate if you have any questions. But I really wanted to highlight the intersection between the donor and philanthropic world on one side, and the impact investment world on the other side, and how you have these intersections between both. Because as Tony-Ann was mentioning, the impact investment world is quite big. It's more than $1 trillion today, and it's growing. So there is capital available that can be mobilized for high impact programs. In terms of sectors, so what we see the most, so we did highlight three: climate, agriculture, and also health and gender. And I think specifically in the current world and what we have seen, and I have seen a few questions around DEI. So actually, gender and everything related to DEI, there is actually a lot of interest from the impact investors to support this type of programs, and this is actually where we can use some catalytic funding to unlock private capital for these types of initiatives. If we can move to the next slide, I wanted also to share, what trends, so what we have seen in 2024 and what we can expect in 2025. So 2024 was quite an interesting year for catalytic finance, because we have seen quite a significant growth. So we have some figures here, more than 70% growth within this this type of financing, and we expect it will be even more significant in 2025. And again, I'm mentioning here the key focus: climate action and gender lens approach, or also DEI if we want a broader scope. And one more thing also to mention, what we have seen in 2024, and it's actually what we do at Cois, it's the emergence of more and more innovative financing models. And again, I don't want to be technical, but blending philanthropic money and private capital into innovative finance structures to fund this type of projects. So this was for 2024, a quite interesting year. January 2025, we have this, shock coming from US, and there is a shift. And actually, I was in Davos last week, and it was quite interesting to see, actually, on one side, the stakeholders involved with, with the UN types of organizations, the DFIs, the public side, where it is quite a shock. And on the other side, I would say the resilience, I wouldn't say the optimism, but the resilience of private philanthropies, even from US, where we have a lot of initiatives, specifically in catalytic financing, actually. And there is, this willingness to step up. We have seen it with Bloomberg actually a few days ago to say, we will take on the, because it doesn't impact their own agenda, and they have a key role to play. So they are stepping up. So in 2025, what we expect is global shift, of course, as we explain here, more catalytic capital initiatives. So more private capitals that will come in and that will be blended with traditional donor funding. And also one thing which is interesting, and also for, when even for the donors, when there are some applications, for specific programs, I think what we call the inter-SDG focus, which is, the relations between several SDGs. So for instance, climate plus health, climate plus gender. These types of programs or initiatives are quite strong and quite in demand, and it's also because the donors, but also the impact investors are more mature now, and they want to do something a bit more advanced, and we see a lot of funds. So for instance, there has been a few funds in 2024 in climate plus health that have been launched. So yeah, I hope I was not too technical, but really to provide a kind of high-level picture of catalytic finance, how it can be useful also for the audience, and what are the trends that we see for 2025. Thanks.
Thank you, Cedric. I think innovative finance, catalytic finance is a new and rapidly increasing area, Cedric. I'd like to pinpoint that if anybody was completely lost about innovative finance, or if you have more practical questions about how to make your programs investable, how to make them appealing to various innovative finance tools, then please watch out for another webinar that is coming in February on this one. You can also just reach out to us. And Cedric, I'm pleased that our podcast will also soon be publishing about this. Sorry, I'm not sure what's wrong. Quick look back at the world that we are more familiar with, at the foundations between Q1 and Q2 2025. My colleagues and I have been in touch with many of those over the last 2 weeks, not just because of the new year, because of also the madness of Washington, of course. And things are looking, again, reasonably good. There we have foundations that have already said, look, we will be accelerating procurement. We will be, Cedric, what you said, the resilience of the sector really is, I think, there. There's even a perceptible anger towards Washington for the harshness that is coming from there. So a few interesting sort of highlights we've learned. Oak Foundation, they've spent around 500 million USAID in 2023 across about 500 programs in 40 countries. So that's quite big. And they are clear to say we are going to spend more in 2024, which is great. The Robert Bosch Foundation, the German Robert Bosch Stiftung, not even on here, I believe, right now, is saying something very similar. They spend around 100 million in health
education and global issues around 30 countries or so, and is looking to do more here as well. As ever, and I'm going to save some time here because we're running a little bit short on time. The foundation should be definitely a percentage of your funding. There are some foundations that have a very clear-cut funding and proposal line and process that's fairly straightforward. And then there are some which are far more technical, far more integrated, where you have to really develop far more local partnerships and partnerships with other grantees, such as the Gates Foundation, for example. Otherwise, your time applying might be a bit of a not the best use of it just yet. So again, there is a foundation and donor list you can access on the website of MZN, and you can also reach out if you need specific help about any application here. Now, I'm very pleased to hand over to the last speaker of the day, looking at the Brits and the Germans, which I'm allowed to make fun of. Betty Gu, we are concluding with you looking at what is happening in London.
Thank you, Chris. So first, we will be looking at the strategy of FCDO. They are still, just like last year, looking at country-specific programs, and they are allocating 75% of the budget to countries, and that is to better understand their needs and to better tailor their programs, actually. There's a reduction in spending in peace building. So it used to be that in last year, 350 million pounds, this budget, but it went down to 233. So there was almost 1/3 of a cut. And cuts are expected that they impact conflict prevention and resolution initiatives. So if we look at the challenges of the budget a bit more, we see that the aid budget is showing fluctuations. So it's expected that this year it will be 14 billion pounds. But it's more than 2024, but still less than 2023. You could be remembering that in 2021, the government reduced its official development assistance from 0.7% of the gross national income to 0.5%. They also issued the news that they would get back to 0.7%. When they can, but it hasn't happened yet. And in international development context, they are focused more on digital transformation, climate action, and again, innovative funding. And they also increased their spending on refugees and asylum seekers in the UK, which means that they cannot, the amount of funding which is for development programs overseas are decreasing. If we look at last year's budget, we see that international finance and health get the largest amounts of spending from FCDO, and geographically, Africa gets almost half the budget, and after that comes Middle East and North Africa.
Interesting.
So when we look at what priorities they seek when giving their funding, we see that, like I said, climate change and environmental protection, what that also means that they want to fund agricultural and food systems to sustainable practices, for example, or they support renewable energy. They also, one of their priority is the poverty and inequality. They are funding humanitarian assistance, health systems. We said already that the peace building budget is decreasing, but they are still funding and prioritizing that. Education and skills, economic growth, inequality, especially trying to impact women and girls, and anti-corruption. And again, like I said, digitalization is one important issue for them. So if we look at how you should be engaging with them in this year, it's similar to last year, but it's always good to repeat since this is quite a significant part. First, you need to understand their mechanism. So what are they offering? Funding program or technical assistance? And these programs always aim global challenges. And it's crucial that you are aligning your proposal with FCDO's objectives because this is mainly what they look at. You should be monitoring the funding opportunities to first discover the opportunity to apply. And also you could participate in the meetings, online workshops, which they like organize, because there you can, that's the first place which you can introduce yourself, introduce your organization to them. And most importantly, you will get the details of the calls in those meetings. And what they look at is even before you apply, that you are building partnerships. Do you have, they actually ask for documents that show that you already introduced your idea to another partner and they are willing to work with you. So it's really important to have strategic partnerships in place. Then, of course, you prepare the proposal, and then when you get it, you ensure that it's compliant and reporting is done properly. So for GIZ, I give the floor to Chris.
Thank you, Betty-Gül. I just want to highlight again, I'm just going back to this, that what you said there, Betty-Gül, and what Cedric says, the focus on climate and innovative financing again. I think underlying this is an FCDO, and not just with FCDO, realization that no amount of donor or indeed philanthropic funding will be able to pay for those SDGs and for those climate goals. So what Cedric says, in terms of catalyzing private finance into these goals is absolutely essential. So even if you feel a little bit lost here, it's worthwhile engaging on that topic of innovative finance. And last but not least, we can have a look at the Germans a little bit. There will be 2 links in the document, so we're keeping it a little bit short here. Please, when you're looking at submitting or engaging with or getting closer to GIZ, then please look at the corporate strategy 23-27 and their sustainability program to 2025. This will not massively change going forward from here on out right now, and all proposals that go into GIZ, all concept notes, need to really show an awareness of knowledge of these core documents that underpin everything that the GIZ and frankly the BMZ even in Berlin are doing in these years. Quick look at the priorities. Not massively surprising, they remain climate change mitigation. This is the word for adaptation, employment propositions or technical vocational training. They are traditionally very strong on environmental protection. Interestingly, that's separate from climate change mitigation, so that, but also very strong that's traditionally, and what they call integrated solutions and digital transformations. I think this pretty much aligns with Betty-Gül, what you just said, digital innovation at FCDO, and including the delivery of programs through technical means, freedom of the press, in the protection of journalists is, for example, a larger funding line here. Last year, GIZ was relatively stable, 4 billion euros spent, most of it on ICI, the International Climate Initiative, with 171 million, up by 10 million, so a nice inflationary change here. Climate and energy is the biggest one, as you would expect, 1.2 billion. This will likely slightly be increased this year, and contracts awarded to third parties, i.e. directly, have actually gone down. So not exactly helping us on the localization part here. The priorities for 25 have barely changed. They have just been a little bit expanded in that, again, innovative finance is on the agenda for the GIZ. They just call it financing sustainable development. So this underlies the question again. We are not going to get there by 2030. We are now halfway point to it. How do we actually finance the achievement of the finance achieving these SDGs without private finance? We are just not going to get there. So these last two goals down here, financing sustainable development and the implementation of the 2030 agenda, is a sense of urgency saying that we do need more money and we do need to really get on with it. Otherwise, we will certainly fail progress on these meetings. So again, if your programs can be changed in a way that they are palatable to any sort of innovative finance product, then I'm sure we would like to hear from them. We maybe help you, and Cedric would like to hear that how we can get this done. As you see, it's on the cards for the donors. And that has been a ridiculous quick look around the major donors. Sorry, I'm going back right now, not forward. Couple of announcements from MZN. I'd like you, if you're interested in more capacity building, you can have a training course in person. There's a right-winning proposals workshop happening in in the Netherlands, Utrecht, next month, and the month after that in London. So you can join that. You can book that via the website. There's also other financing and funding related in-person and online courses that are free at your disposal. I think the next cohort for writing proposals is actually starting in 2 weeks or so. And of course, you can join our next webinar next month, month after. That is all about the use of AI in proposal writing. So a lot more practical webinar, how we use that. And there's a course on that as well, which is fairly hands-on of how we actually use AI in proposal writing. It helps a lot with localization. And yes, there's also a training course on impact investments. So all this innovative finance, catalytic finance, blended finance, as Cedric was discussing. If you need to know more via the series of webinars and working blocks or one-to-one support, you can sign up for that training as well. I think this is pretty much it. We're going over to the Q&A right now. I just would like to remind everybody that MZN is a social enterprise. We're really here to build stronger and better functioning nonprofit organizations that secure more funding. I firmly believe that we need strong nonprofit organizations, impact organizations, to build the world we all want to see. Our services are on track to become mostly subsidized, or some of them even free to small NGOs by 2030, though that strategy, I'm very pleased, is on track so far. And if you need any help in doing that, please reach out to hello@mzininternational.com. All right, I promised 45 minutes. We've used 51 minutes. That you please don't hit me. That was too bad. Thank you very much for listening. Let's go into the Q&As.
Yes, we can start with climate change. For example, we have the question that is the shifting funding climate likely to result in less localization, i.e. solutions and staff might be increasingly important into the global south. So for this, maybe Chris, would you like to answer, or?
I'm sorry, can you say ask questions again? I didn't quite get that.
So I think they're asking, since the funding is shifting to climate change, does that mean that increasingly solutions will be imported into the global south?
I think they mean for catalytic finance. Possibly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Cedric, maybe you can help me out here on the catalytic finance side. The focus from donors on climate adaptation and climate mitigation, which, by the way, has changed from battling climate change. I think there's a sad acknowledgement that we are, sort of too late here, quite too much late, and much of climate change is now unavoidable. That's bad enough. Climate adaptation and climate mitigation has moved into the center, and these the later we leave it, the more costly it will get. Therefore, a realization, at least from the donors I speak to, that no amount of tax funding and government funding will ever be enough to mitigate and adapt to the terrible climates that we're moving into. And therefore, we're looking for new finance mechanism. And Cedric, maybe you can help me out here.
Yeah.
The whole motivation, as far as I sort of perceive it from most of our donor communities I speak to every week, is that the motivation is to say, look, let's use our tax money to mobilize more private money. Is that what your perception as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the question also around the solutions that we might see more in the global south. So it's definitely true, and definitely actually why catalytic finance is used. And if we double down a bit in terms of the types, so financing is one side, but also the types of solutions that are being launched on the ground. So within climate adaptation, we have several types of solutions. So one is natural-based solutions. So I don't know if in the audience anyone is involved into conservation, biodiversity, reforestation, even what we call blue carbon, which is related to mangroves. So natural-based solutions is really one of the key pillars, because the idea is to say, like, nature is the best solution actually for climate action. So let's use it as a solution. This is number one. Number two, anything related to regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture, and resilient agriculture is also really a key solution, and where we see a lot of funding. So one example is the FASA fund, which has been launched recently for agriculture solutions in Africa.
Yeah, the Sapphire Fund, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So a lot of initiatives, within agriculture, also in Europe, actually, from the EU. So nature-based solution, agriculture, and after the third one is energy. Energy access, off-grid, energy efficiency, all this type of energy projects are also very key, and there is a lot of there is quite significant programs and financing going into these types of projects on climate adaptation.
So if I may just follow up with that, Marie Nazum has made a very good point. I want to point that out here, that gender and DEI are not interchangeable. So Marie, you're of course completely right. DEI is much broader, which includes disability, for example, includes more things than that as well. Her question, however, is, are catalytic finance investors showing interest in this broader definition, or are they just showing interest in gender? Cedric, what do you think?
Could you please repeat the end?
Do you think that the catalytic finance investors and innovators, are they just interested in DEI, or are they actually interested in the much broader gender question here?
So I think it's really the broader gender question, and I think what we see is especially from the corporates, and I saw a lot on these topics in Davos. It's value chain and gender. So for big corporate donors, actually, how they can ensure gender equity along the value chain.
Yes.
And we have a lot of discussions in this area, because there is the value chain, it goes also to the global south. So there is capital available in big corporates in Europe or in US who are conscious that there is an impact along their value chain in gender. So it's one of the key trends, and catalytic financing is actually going this way. Yeah,
absolutely.
I will add. Yeah, sorry. Can I just follow it up with another question which is related? Someone is asking if catalytic funding is available for disability-related programs.
Yeah.
Is there an interest from the catalytic funding in this area?
Yes, exactly. So definitely disability. We actually had a project in 2024 for disability led ventures in Africa and in India, for instance. But it's quite sector agnostic. It's one of the key focus. Yeah, and within catalytic finance and impact finance, it's definitely an area of focus because also there is a lack of solutions. So they want to promote solutions. So catalytic finance really makes sense in this case. So happy to hear more maybe later on.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also involved in a project. I think this is worthwhile pointing out, Betty of a food processing number of companies in East Africa. I think macadamia nuts were involved, and other sort of food exports, high value cash crops. And a condition of the investors was that NGOs help those food processors make the workplace more inclusive with a particular regard to disability inclusion. And that was a real sticking point. That wasn't just a point of saying, oh, let's just stick that in as an appendix to the funding agreement. That was the key to them. So I think that shows that they are serious about it. It's right that they are finally serious about it as well. But it changes the way an NGO should work, of course. Would you mind if I pull out another question just to not be completely focused on innovative finance alone? Valentia Aslani, I hope I pronounced that name correctly, apologies for butchering it, asked, what will the role of development banks be in this landscape of donor cuts? And will they have a bigger role in providing funding to NGOs? I'd love to hear from Tony Ann on this one. What do you think on the relationship between our traditional donors, USAID, GIZ, UN even, plus the DFIs, the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, the other IFIs?
Yep. Well, this was a question that I was exploring earlier this week as we tried to seek out, maybe other donors that might or might not have been a little neglected, as we got very comfortable in the way we were doing things. And I think there may be a viable option, separate and apart from being fully funded from like a US or, another donor that's, fully focused on their own priorities. So I think it's an option that we can explore, but I would caution to adapt the same agility, flexibility, and out-of-the-box thinking that we've been preaching during this session, to not put all your hopes on, one or two or three even donors. So it's not
I would agree here. And I would also like to point out Samantha Powers, the now much missed former administrator of the USAID. I think Tony and you and I discussed this, how she said in the conversation, I can get a visa into any country, but sometimes I can't get across the Potomac to speak to the World Bank.
Yeah.
And I think there's a visible divide between the donor community and the international finance institutions, and that is slowly coming, hopefully bridging it slowly. And my colleague Florian said, you remember that he made the point, he lives in Geneva. On the one side are all the UN and the donor agencies. On the other side of the lake are all the international finance. And if you know Geneva, there's exactly one bridge connecting them. And I think that's very symbolic of the divide.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question, and then we have to stop. Otherwise, we could go on forever. Ino, I'll just use the last one. Ino, you've just asked, how do you foresee UN organizations positioning themselves in this landscape? Difficult one. Look, the UN organizations are really mostly funded by the US government. The WHO has been withdrawn from by the US, even though that other philanthropic donors have now said, look, we are making up the US contribution. They are not known to be the most agile organizations, I must admit. They are set in their mandates that sometimes can't be changed without consensus, which is hard to get. However, we've also seen remarkable innovation and remarkable willingness to innovate at some UN agencies, such as WFP or the UNFCCC. And I find that they are very interested in working with innovative finance providers, with the private sector. They are interested in not just hosting, but also moving progress along, not just projects. That's the language I hear from Bonn and from Geneva. What do you think?
I think you hit the nail on the head. The UN is, and I worked there for quite a few years, it's very slow in, dealing with funding issues, funding disruptions, but there are some promising aspects, based on different agencies that are, doing things a little bit differently. And I do know that in the case of emergencies, UN agencies have the option to petition, member states to invoke their voluntary contributions power, and that would give them a little bit of emergency funding in case, everything is going to be halted. Not to say that this would cover every single, facet that, having the US would be able to cover, but it would not ground things to a complete halt.
I agree. Finally, I'd like to close with a word of compassion and a word of hope here. I'd like us to remember what Betty Gu mentioned about FCDO in the UK, how funding after the Brexit gone down and then it goes up again. Bear in mind what my colleague Tony Ann just said. The UN is maybe slow to react. It's subject to the funding as well, but it will come back. So I wouldn't now panic and throw USAID out of your budget. Is the largest bilateral donor in the world. And this madness will eventually either be stopped by some federal judge or it will certainly be creeping back, much like FCDO does. So really, this reiterates the need for a diversified, well-strategized funding portfolio where we can take these bumps in the road. Finally, I want to say that it's only with a well-diversified, well-strategically planned pipeline, what I said initially, pipeline management is really important, that we can also continue these programs that we do to improve the world, and that too many of them really mean the difference between life and death even. So I think we ought to owe it to the people we work for to make our funding line as robust, as diversified, and as professional as we can. I want to thank Cedric in particular for joining us today, for the little insight into innovative finance. Thank you so much to my colleagues as well, and to all of you joining us here, for so many people. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day. Goodbye for today.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.